Living with trauma-driven struggles goes on so long sometimes that you might find that even the thought of breaking free of old behaviors and problems sounds scary. Like if you had the love and peace in your life that you know you want, what would you actually do all day? It's normal and okay that we float for a while, avoiding reality and seeking comfort just to get by until we feel ready to get moving in earnest on our healing. But soon your future starts to pull on you, drawing you forward, showing you the things that have been hard to face. And then everything depends on rising to face it. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Matri, and she writes, "Dear Fairy, I'm struggling with several issues I'd like your advice on. My first concern involves self-doubt and trusting my own experiences and decisions during healing. I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on in Matri's life right now." She says, "Since distancing myself from unhealthy ties with family members and previous friends that I trauma bonded with in order to foster healthier relationships, I feel very vulnerable, uncertain, and alone, totally out of my element. I once watched an interesting video about how lobsters grow. A soft-bodied creature, a lobster will begin to outgrow its hard outer shell as it matures, causing it pressure and discomfort. For growth to occur, however, the lobster must shed its old shell completely and hide under rocks for some time, during which it is vulnerable and extra vigilant while rejuvenating a new, more befitting shell for its stage of growth." It's lovely. "I feel like a lobster who's trying to grow in my new shell. I feel unprotected without my familiar circle of complaining, trauma-bonded friendships, and breadcrumb relationships, because at least it was some type of connection and perceived protection from the dooming abandonment melange." Dooming, yep. "I seem to make friends so easily in my 20s and early 30s, but I'm rocky at making new healthy friendships and feel like I always say something weird or off-putting to the other person." I get you. "My past insights and intuitions have been the unhealthy result of CPTSD-driven beliefs and behaviors. I feel embarrassed and foolish in retrospect because I felt so confident that I was right at the time. If my red flag detector was damaged, I've lacked experiencing healthy relationships. How do I know I'm doing the right thing? How can I trust myself? If I rely on new healthy friends and support networks for clarity and awareness of my role in situations and appropriate next steps, then how do I know when to trust my own gut feeling? What if their advice is just the way they would do things and not right for me? My childhood experiences have left me with a lot of anger, resentment, confusion, and a longing to be accepted, particularly by men. I have an underlying fear of abandonment, issues with being assertive, and setting boundaries. I'm doing my best to maintain humility as I'm growing, though feelings of embarrassment have surfaced while reflecting on both my arrogance and naivete over the years. I have a few family ties and have made efforts to distance myself because I don't feel they've been very kind to me. I'm just realizing I've been the family scapegoat. I feel like I'm drifting alone in the world. I become frustrated and full of rage when the smallest things go wrong, and I feel the strong impulse to hit and punch things several times a week. I take it out on poor cardboard shipping boxes. I use medical marijuana daily. Oh, okay. And it's been my crutch since I was 14 years old. I know all this at this point. I need to deal with my anger and shame. But what does that look like? Are there other practical tools in addition to the daily practice that I can use? Also, does every feeling have to be sourced back to resentment and fear? I sometimes have trouble placing all my dysregulated thoughts and feelings into just these two buckets. I really want to find a partner and desire marriage. I want someone who can travel with me and will be my family. At my age, it feels like most of my friends are married and or have children already. I feel like I'm being left behind, the unwanted one. I look in the mirror and see the start of gray hair, eye wrinkles, small age spots, and I feel like I'm running out of time. It seems like all the good men are taken, or I'm not attracted to the ones who are. I know this isn't true, but where are they? I've been making healthier, more outgoing choices since listening to your videos. I read the books, took your dating course, and am attending your retreat this month. I've been doing Pilates every weekday morning for the past 2 years, which has really helped my confidence, mood, and body pain. I recently graduated with a master's degree in business, bought a home, and manage a successful Airbnb. I have a secure remote job in hospital administration, though I don't care about it, and I don't feel it uses my talents. And I'm about to get a big promotion. I've joined my works chapter of Toastmasters, began piano lessons, and began ballroom dancing on Friday nights. I feel like I'm in a good place to start dating again. I don't have any social media, and I feel foreign to online dating, so I'm not certain how to meet healthy, available people. I'm a 35-year-old woman, never married, and don't desire children. I grew up in a home full of abuse with a domineering ex-military mother who was controlling and emotionally and physically abusive. She would say things to me like, "I'm your God, your judge, I own you." What? "You are the most selfish bitch I ever met." The dad I grew up with was extremely abusive and used religion to control and abuse my mother. I watched him crush her collarbone with his bare hands and break her ribs by kicking her repeatedly. We were trained to lie about it to teachers and police. Our house had an anxious, heavy feel to it, filled with the helpless confusion of tiny children living in the shadow of a monster. I spent most of my time reading books, watching Animal Planet, and writing short stories. After my mother was Baker acted, that means involuntarily locked up, she divorced my dad when I was, and she puts quotes around dad, I'm not sure why, when I was 7, and revealed to me that he wasn't my real father. I see. My biological father was the same as my older sister's, a dangerous and abusive man. She said he didn't want me either, and it was his loss. I felt very unwanted for a long time, and I'm still riddled with an internalized sense of rejection and shame. My great-uncle became the only father figure in my life, a temperamental older man that constantly criticized me and expressed his disappointment that I wasn't a boy as I worked on his farm. I thought I had dealt with my childhood trauma long ago because I strived to make so much more of my life, distant from the trailer park I came from. I've overcome so much and have done things that others only dream of, such as serving in the Peace Corps in Africa and traveling to 36 countries. But now I think I've been mistaking achievement and staying busy for healing. I tend to only feel good enough when I'm accomplishing something or feel something is perfect. I tend to rush through everything, especially aspects of self-care. I often feel the people don't really like me once they get to know me, or as I've done something wrong or inappropriate. I fawn and freeze during moments when I want to remain strong and poised. I admire when others assert themselves. Yet, when I have the opportunity, I feel a lump in my throat, I sweat, and my body prickles all over. I really want to stop and to find a good man to spend my life with. Any tough love you can offer would be appreciated. Thank you, Maitri. Okay, Maitri. What a beautiful letter. What a great writer you are. You very vividly portray what it's like to be you in a way. There's so many points in here where I can understand completely what you're saying. And then a couple places where I'm like, I don't get it. But it's really an unusually well-written letter, and thank you for that. It's you describe a beautiful sense of disconnection. Clearly, you are a writer. I don't know, so by now that I'm reading this letter after the retreat, so I guess you and I have met, but I don't know who you are, and which is probably good, because then I'm very objective about this. So, all right, let me tell you about what I heard you say here. You distanced yourself from your family and previous friends that you had trauma bonded with in order to foster healthier relationships. Now, I think when you say trauma bonded with, you mean that you guys both had trauma and you related on that, and so that was a big basis of your relationship. So I just want to point out that trauma bonding actually means something different. Well, if I'm wrong and you did mean what it really means, I stand corrected, but I just want to say trauma bonding is intermittent reinforcement. It's when somebody loves you, takes it away, loves you, takes it away, and it like causes your brain to like hook on addictively to them, and you'll do anything to stay with them. And it can work not just on people or children, but on rats. It's a psychological torture technique. And I don't think that's what you meant. But a lot of people, common usage, they say trauma bonded. when they mean we're just a bunch of effed up people hanging out. And I know what you mean on that front. I love your lobster analogy. Yes, changing is like that. Sometimes we have this vulnerable period where we don't have a shell and it takes a while to grow a new one. And so we have to kind of hide out for a while. You got to watch out because it's also like the favorite excuse of people of avoidance, of people who just want to go isolate for a long time. And they go, look, I'm healing for 25 years, you know? And sometimes it goes long past its usefulness as a healing technique and it's just avoidance, and too much avoidance and you can't heal. So I throw that in there, but I think your lobster analogy is just beautiful and perfect. So it's hard to make friends. You feel unprotected without your familiar circle of complaining, trauma-bonded friendships and breadcrumb relationships, because at least it was some type of connection. Yes, I totally relate. And you know what? I've been through like 3 cycles of this like change of the cast of characters, because that's how many times I've had to make radical changes forward in my life. I had a long way to go. And then I also understand what you're saying here. Your past, quote, insights and intuitions were messed up. They turned out not to be reliable. You were certain about what you were feeling. And then in time, it turned out they were trauma-driven beliefs. Your red flag detector was operating. And that is so normal. And I just love that you are insightful enough to just say, oh yeah, I thought it was my intuition, but it was my trauma talking. We all do that. It drives people crazy. I have a video out there that says, don't trust these gut instincts. And what I'm talking about is when the trauma is talking and like, oh yeah, you got to do this self-destructive thing. And people often comment on it without watching the video going, you should always trust your instincts. And I'm like, not if you have what I have. It takes us time to heal enough to know what the difference is between gut instincts and the trauma talking, which is, you know, sometimes all we know at first. So good for you for being careful on the distinction there. So you're asking so much the right questions. How do I know I'm doing the right thing? How can I trust myself? Those are the right questions. And you know, when you're fully healing, when you're fully engaged in your healing, you will learn to do that through trial and error, the way everybody else did, but at a somewhat younger age than we did, right? We have a delay in our development. And so we end up with a lack of clarity around aspects of ourselves that our peers, our age peers, already have. And we think, oh, I'm terrible. But it's really normal for people who were severely neglected and abused, as you were, to have a delay there. And it's kind of beautifully designed like that. Somehow the child versions of ourselves know how to sort of pack it away, you know, keep it safe from everything, just close it down and then bring it out later. But it's just that when it's coming out later in adulthood, it's a little messy and it's a little bit confusing, and it's causes us to be alone for long periods of time, which is hard, but it's part of it. You've got such a good ability to describe what you're going through. Should you listen to other people's advice? Or is it just, other people's advice is always their advice and what they would do. So we take it under advisement. We take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes hearing other people's experience can help us get in touch with our own best wisdom. So it's okay to ask for advice. I just wouldn't recommend completely surrendering your decisions to somebody else's advice unless you're incapacitated in some way, or unless you have reasons that you really trust their judgment and you think that what they're suggesting is the best thing for you, in which case it's your wisdom, right? It's your decision. So you got left with a lot of anger, resentment, confusion, and longing to be accepted. What I think is clearly very advanced about your healing is that you say, I'm doing my best to maintain humility as I'm growing through feelings of embarrassment, reflecting on my arrogance and naivete over the years. If you're aware that you have arrogance and naivete, you are well on your way to healing. I mean, really, like, so many people don't get that far. And it's hard, you know, for those of us who realize we have faults, to interact with people who absolutely believe they have no faults, who believe that they actually are better and superior in judgment. You know, it's hard to do that. It can make it painful to apologize sometimes when we've been arrogant to somebody who doesn't realize that their arrogance is arrogance. But you know what? We get better anyway. It doesn't matter how far along they are. I love that you are in touch with that about yourself. That's a really good sign that you're making good progress. So you have few family ties. They haven't been kind. You've been the scapegoat. Yeah, that's a whole thing, isn't it? And a lot of what you're describing is kind of scapegoat wounds. I feel like I'm drifting alone in the world. Yes, I know that feeling so well. But you found us now. Hopefully the Crappy Childhood Fairy community feels like a tribe. And if you came to that retreat, hopefully you became a member and you've made friends here. The people here are like more than anybody in the world who I feel at home with, who I feel understood by. And I never felt understood until I started putting my experience on YouTube and got some comments back. I was just like, people would comment back like, I can't believe you're describing what it's like to be me. And I reply back to them, I can't believe you have had this experience too. I literally thought I was the only one. So it turns out we have a lot of normal symptoms of growing up with something abnormal going on. And when we find each other, it really helps to take the shame off and help make it understandable that we got like this. Like, it's not our fault that we developed this manner, this mode. And now we're the ones who are charged with finding a way to undo it, to relax the grip of these trauma-driven adaptations so that we can start to have some of the finer things in life, some of the more subtle things like love and connection. And those are often lost to us when we're in survival mode, when we're just being tough and strong. And, we get very black and white thinking about things because we had to in order to survive. But then we start opening our minds and it's messy, just like you describe. So you said you feel frustrated and full of rage when the smallest things go wrong. And you get a strong impulse to hit and punch things, and you take it out on a cardboard shipping box. All right, I'm just going to get in here with some advice because you asked. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's normal that you're having emotional dysregulation and intense rage. And you may have been told that it's all very meaningful and you need to feel it and explore it, but I question that. I don't think that's always true. I think if you had a lot of childhood trauma and you tend to get emotionally dysregulated, there's actually no bottom to that anger. So whereas another person who didn't have trauma, they're like, yeah, I punched a cardboard box and then I had catharsis and I was fine. Did that happen to you? It doesn't sound like it. So, venting rage has never worked for me. And people have looked at it, like punching pillows, screaming, that sort of thing. There's no evidence that it helps relieve anger, actually. I'll tell you what does keep people trapped in anger: weed. Daily weed use. You can call it medical marijuana if you want, because of course it can be used in a medicinal way, but when it's used daily, and I understand for some people, like, that's how they roll, and that's fine. But if you're asking me, yeah, that's keeping you from being able to process anger. And I don't just mean psychologically, I just mean like neurologically. I noticed this a long time ago in my life. I've known lots and lots of people who were daily marijuana users. I made the correlation like in my 20s, like, gosh, they're all so dang angry after a while. That's where it goes. And I'm sure there are exceptions, but that's my observation is people who use weed every day, no matter how much they claim it's medicinal for them, it turns them angry and stuck. That's my observation. For whatever it's doing for you, is it worth it? Because I don't think having rage and having to like scream and punch boxes is good for marriage. I don't think so. And this is, you're asking like, what's going on here? You even said it's been my crutch since I was 14. So there's probably a lot of stuff that 14-year-old you just never got to really move through and figure out how to process because you've had a mind-altering thing going on. And I'm really not anti-mind-altering things. I'm just trying to be real about mind-altering things will keep you from processing thoughts and feelings. And if you have complex PTSD, and I could see why you might, because of your childhood and what you lived through, the complex PTSD can make it very difficult to process thoughts and feelings, to move them from this active charged state where all your adrenaline and cortisol comes up for small things, and processing it into a memory. And so when you have a lot of that kind of stuck in your consciousness or body, or, it's hard to really envision like, how is that exactly stored in us? It's just there. It's just like reactive. It's ready to go. Well, if you want to process that, I would just really consider getting off mind-altering substances. And maybe you don't do it forever. Maybe you do it for a period of time while you're healing so that you can feel the feelings that are there. With the daily practice, and I can tell from what you're saying, you've maybe dipped your toe in it when you wrote this letter. Now that you did a 4-day retreat with me, I bet you've done it a lot more and you understand more, and hopefully you were able to ask me questions there. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the daily practice can't work when you're on mind-altering substances. So there you go. It can't do its thing. What I would describe as the benefit of the daily practice based on my experience is, in the daily practice, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a technique. It's a very specific technique for writing to release resentful and fearful thoughts. Very specific technique, and it's free. I'll teach it to you. If you just try this at home, you risk doing something that would just make you more upset. So that's why I'm very insistent. Take the free course. Or you can read my book, Re-Regulated, to learn how to do it. And you can always get the links to the course and the book down in the description section below. And remember, there's a little more button, more link that you have to click. You'll see the top few lines of the description section under every video. You have to open it by clicking that little link that says more. And then you'll see lots and lots of links and information about how to access my stuff and things that you might find helpful, many of them free. So with the daily practice, what the basic idea is you're naming, you're not sourcing, what you're describing is something much too active and analytical and trying to make things go a certain way. You're just naming what's bothering you and lumping it into two rough buckets. And we're talking about things that bother you. So there's either anxious category, which is fear, or angry category, which is resentment. And you name them, you ask for them to be removed, and then you rest your mind for 20 minutes. We call that meditation. Just rest your mind, let your mind recompose itself, and then see what happens. Now, the thing is, if you're high, everybody gets dysregulated sometimes, even non-traumatized people, and everybody eventually re-regulates. Well, virtually everyone. But you can't get re-regulated when you're high. You can't. And you can't recognize signs of dysregulation when they show up. It's indistinguishable. Maybe if it were severe, you could detect it, or you detect it. But really what we're doing when we're healing is we're teaching ourselves to be aware when we've sort of fallen into dysregulation. And I would liken that process. I don't know if you get migraines. I used to get them a lot. I rarely get them anymore. But it's like you can feel them coming. All of a sudden you're like, oh no, there's almost nothing you can do to turn it around. And then it comes, and then blah, you're like launched into this neurological state, and you are stuck there for a while, and it takes a while to come back out. And it's very much the same with dysregulation. You don't want to get dysregulated all the time, but traumatized people, we do. We lapse easily into dysregulation. We have a harder time coming out of it. So what we do in my healing method is we learn to notice the signs of dysregulation and turn it around very quickly, learn to re-regulate and stay regulated more of the time. Because, my darling, when you are regulated, the world is your oyster. You have choices. You have pauses between things you don't like and how you want to respond to it. You have access to your intelligence, to your wisdom, to your intuition. Things are starting to really come online for you when you're regulated. The minute you're doing mind-altering things, and including prescribed medicine, you're going to break that easy access for you to learn and follow the impulses that you're getting that are telling you, now I'm dysregulated. Okay, here I go. I'm getting back re-regulated. So in my courses, we do re-regulation journals. It's all documented in the book, how you do this, but it's all about tuning in, and tuning in takes all the awareness you've got. Now, the thing about the daily practice is it provides emotional relief. I wouldn't expect anybody to give up, whether it was weed or cigarettes like it was for me, or booze as it was for some people, or, other drugs or raging or whatever, that people are using to get out of the sadness and out of the dysregulation. But there is a better way. You need a way to comfort yourself. There's a way you can get comforted that's more stable, less consequential. When I was using cigarettes to re-regulate, I didn't know that's what I was doing. But looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I could smoke a cigarette and it would kind of help me hold it together when I was falling apart neurologically. You kind of, okay. And it's something about the drug and the pause that you take to smoke. But every time I'd quit, I basically would get depressed and disorganized mentally to the point that it didn't even seem worth it to quit. It would be better in my mind back then to just go ahead and get cancer compared to what I was feeling. And I'm so glad I found a better way to feel better. That's not cigarettes, that's sustainable. I've done it for 30 years now. I do it twice a day, and it does help. It helps me feel smoothed out, calm, alert, aware of myself. It's made such a difference in my life from doing that twice a day. So that's the idea. So you can dip in and out. A lot of people do. They learn the daily practice and they do it once here, once there, and they're like, yeah, that's nice. I don't know. And then they're doing all this other stuff. But I just want to be honest with you. Yeah, using weed every day is just going to make it really hard for the daily practice to do its thing for you. And if you dare, you could take a day off of the weed, see how it goes, write and meditate a lot to deal with the feelings that come up. That's what's going to come up, right? Feelings, maybe some physical symptoms. There's some withdrawal with weed. It's not considered the hardest drug in the world, but the people I know who have given up, it's hard, it's a major thing. But you could take it one day at a time. I would not expect your anger to resolve really well if you're treating it with weed. So in the daily practice, we do have a place to take our anger. Now, you sound like you've done therapy before, and perhaps you still do, and maybe that was helpful to you. For me, I would get angrier and angrier in therapy because for me, talking about my trauma, which was how it was always done when I did therapy at the 11 therapists I used to see over time, it just would trigger more anger and more dysregulation. I wasn't able to process my thoughts. Whatever they were saying that was helpful and good advice, I couldn't really take it in or act on it or remember it even. And so there was this mismatch between the method and my symptoms, because in those days they didn't know. They didn't know what was CPTSD and they didn't know about dysregulation, but now we know. So when you say, are there other practical tools in addition to the daily practice that I can use? I would just say, sure, there's tons of things out there that people use and you can try them, but doing a dozen things is not the thing that's missing here. It's doing one thing fully. And if you like the daily practice, why don't you go ahead and give it your all and do it as taught? And that means either get my book Re-Regulated and read all of chapter 3 and the appendix so that you understand how this works. Because these questions where you're like, why do we have to put it all in fear and resentment? That's like right there in the FAQs. It's there for you. It's because we're keeping it simple. We're keeping it simple, and we're not naming all the feelings. We're just naming the distress feelings, and we're putting them in 2 buckets. And there's some very specific language for anybody who's learned the method. It's very specific to help you release it, not cherish it, not analyze it, not try to dig it up or get it into some sort of sequence or anything like that. It's a dump. It's like we're just blah, We're naming what is bothering us. And then asking for it to be removed. Or if you're more of a higher self-oriented person, you can release it. But that's the idea. And if you just hear my little quick description of it here on YouTube, as many people have, you're just going to be like, that doesn't quite make sense. So please, before you try it, come learn the full technique so that it will work for you. It was life and death for me. That was one of the reasons I waited so long to put this on YouTube. And I've had it here since 2016, but I waited years to put it up because I really wanted it to be the right information that saved my life and nothing less. So that's why I'm such a stickler about, please go, get the book or the free course. And that's why the course is free too. And there's free calls every week with me and my staff that you can come to if you sign up for that course. We'll invite you. So you want to find a partner and desire marriage, and you want, I like what you want. I like your vision. I like how well you've been able to name what you want. And you feel like the left behind and unwanted one. That's a really normal thing to feel with trauma. And where are the good guys? So I have a feeling when you have processed what happened with your family. Now, before I had the daily practice, I was pretty interested in my family story and the specifics, the very negative points of what had happened. And it was negative. Some very bad things happened to me. And part of my healing was expressing that, and accepting that, that really happened and I'm affected by it. And then part of my healing was moving that out of the story. It's no longer who I am, right? It's out of the story. So you needed to tell me so that I could get a sense of what your trauma has been. But I would say a really great goal for you is to no longer be identified with what these jerks did to their kid. It's not you. And sometimes when you're having a hard time, you'll know how you got that way, and it's not your fault. But for you to be able to really focus on the behaviors and the turns of thought as you do so well here, this is where all your healing is. I love that you're going to Toastmasters, you're getting a promotion, you're taking piano lessons and ballroom dancing. This is So good. You know, I'd sort of be surprised if you haven't already met somebody because you're doing this, but your anger is in the way, my friend. This thing where you have all this anger, it needs to be processed. I used to hate that word. It's so touchy-feely, such psychopath. We need to process this. To me, that always meant we need to talk all night about a fight that's never going to be resolved. That's what I was like, oh no, processing, not more of that. I'm exhausted. But processing now, as I understand it, it's about taking those experiences that are very charged for us and triggering, running them through the process that allows them to be merely memories so that we can recall the memory. We can say, oh yeah, I remember that happened, and our heart doesn't start pounding and we get full of adrenaline and we're just like back off to the races, dysregulated thoughts, right? So you can process this stuff through the daily practice if you like. I think there are different ways that people do it, but that's how I did it. I just, you get it on paper. I have fear, this happened to me, fear they said this, fear I'll never meet anybody, fear I'm left behind. Like everything you said so beautifully in this letter could have been written as fear and resentment. Get to the calls, my friend. If you didn't get it in the retreat when we were together, come to the calls. It's very nuanced. And I'm on Zoom every 2 weeks for 2 hours with people all over the world taking questions. They're often the same questions, but they're worth answering again about each person's particular context about it so that people understand this is radical. We're actually like releasing these feelings. We're releasing these thoughts. We're not denying the feelings or thoughts. We're not suppressing them. We're not saying they're ridiculous. We're just getting them out on paper and having more space. And there's something that I just experienced my mind can do. My mind can kind of move forward with something a little happier, a little more robust when I can move that stuff out of the way in writing. We also know that writing is a pathway for the brain that can avoid a lot of triggers that would otherwise be set off like a pinball machine when we talk about the trauma. I'm one of those people. You might be too. So I hope that helps you process that anger. You're doing so many things right, but process that anger and the rushing through self-care. You know what? Yeah, totally. Is that so bad? I don't know. The only self-care that really, really matters for me is that I write and meditate every day. If I do that, I will usually do the other things fairly well, good enough anyway, too. If I don't do that, I can barely manage anything. I'm just like right back to my old limitations. So thank you for this gorgeous letter, Maitri. I hope this helps. I'm going to leave everybody with kind of a fun thing. I've told you about all these classes, connection bootcamp, dating, relationships, daily practice. All of that's down in the description section. But I have this very fun free download that's called 1 Year to Heal. Heads up, you can't heal in a year. It's a thought exercise. If you had to heal really fast, like quick, what would you do? And this is to access your intuitive knowledge about what you need to do to heal. And it can help point to 1 or 2 things that would be very good to start on for you right now. So my 1 Year to Heal exercise can be downloaded for free right there. And I will see you very soon.